Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me for this week's episode of When I Grow Up. On today's episode, it's my pleasure to welcome my guest, AJ Dungo. Hey AJ, how are you?
I'm very well. Very excited to be talking to you, Blair.
Oh man, I'm excited. I feel honored that you're even here. So if you have been you're a regular listener here at When I Grow Up, AJ's girlfriend, Monique, is the footwear designer that I interviewed a couple of weeks ago. And he was so gracious enough to give me his time tonight to chat with me about a little bit about what he does. So AJ, without, delaying it any longer, what is it that you do?
Quick sidebar, just want to say thanks to Monique for getting us connected. She'll be a hard act to follow.
Oh, no, yeah, for sure. I agree. She is a hard act to follow, but I have full confidence.
So to answer your question, in the simplest terms, I'm an illustrator. What that means, it's funny because a lot of people, when they hear that I make art for a living, they'll be like, the closest thing that maybe they know in their mind is like, oh, graphic designer or painter, like certain terminology sticks in people's minds. And illustrator is sort of this, it's sort of like, I don't know, it's kind of a secret profession because, you see images everywhere, all throughout your life. You're walking through the world, billboards, advertisements, TV ads, there's movies, television shows, there's imagery everywhere. And an illustrator is behind making those pictures for everyone.
Yeah,
so that's what I do.
I guess to kind of talk about that a little bit more, that's true, right? So like these days, I do feel like when people think of images or artists, they do think of immediately like graphic designers because that's like who we go to now for design and things like that. So is there like a defining way to like separate? Because I realize that you do your art probably on a piece of technology, right? And so like how is it different from a graphic designer?
Yeah, it's interesting, like the terms that we use to describe all these professions, because there's a lot of overlap. If you take a painter or an illustrator or a graphic designer, there's certain things that each of us does, but to get specific, illustrators deal primarily with images, whereas a graphic designer might deal with organizing text for typography. They'll deal with assets like websites and things like that, or
Gotcha.
if you look at a layout of a newspaper, a graphic designer did that. But then if you look at that same newspaper, the articles that have images attached to them that aren't photographs, they're done by an illustrator. So it's sort of like a really fun profession where your voice is what people seek you for. You're sort of someone put it really cool where they said, like, not only am I a sellsword, but they like want my sword specifically to use, like
Yes.
they want an illustrator's specific voice. So they're seeking you out for that voice, so you don't really have to be concerned about being anyone else. You can just be yourself and make your own art. And that's what people will come to you for, which is really cool.
I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, right.
So beautiful, man. I am like completely artistically challenged.
That's not true.
No, it is. It's totally true, AJ.
Everyone has a bit, it can be learned. Monique said this in hers. These are skills that can be learned,
Yes. Okay. I'll try to believe you once more. But all that to say, yeah, so much respect. I think before we met today, obviously I did a little like stalking, social media stalking.
Yeah, you
gotta, like study who I'm gonna meet with. But man, your art specifically, I think was, for me, very mind-blowing, just because I can't wrap my head around coming up with images like that and putting it to paper.
Thanks, Blair.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious. So you specifically, do you, I guess job-wise, like, are you a freelancer? Do you work
Yeah.
for a specific company?
So I am I guess if you want to get specific, um I'm an editorial freelance illustrator, but I'm also this is where it gets kind of dicey because I also do comics, but like there's been a whole kerfuffle about how to define, is it a cartoonist or a graphic novelist or an author? Like, we can get caught in the weeds with the verbiage, but yeah, I primarily work for, so a publication will seek me out, like the New York Times or the New Yorker, and they'll ask me if I can work, if I'm available for a job. So it's kind of cool. Like I'm not literally sitting by the phone waiting for work, but it's kind of how it works, like um, once someone calls and asks for my availability, I'll block off however much time I need for that specific person.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you'll get work that overlaps. So then that's where a really important aspect of my job is time management and organization. So you have to, you don't have to work for anyone, but you're your own boss. So you really need to stay on top of everything before you get overwhelmed. But that's the double-sided coin of this profession, is like you have all this freedom, but you also have all the responsibility.
Right. Yeah. So I would a publication, would they reach
Yeah.
out to you specifically because of like your style of work, or is it like,
Yes.
oh, okay, so you don't cater to what they want?
Well, it depends. I mean, every artist is different. There are some people that are extremely adaptable, and so like your portfolio reflects what you can do. You only put what work you want to make on your website or your portfolio or social media. So people will see what you do, and they'll be able to see where you fit. Like, maybe I wouldn't fit too good for a specific job, but someone who has a different type of voice would be perfect for that job. So that's where an art director comes in, and they have a Rolodex in their mind, and literally sometimes like just a list of people who would be good for certain types of work. So there'd be like, maybe there's mental health issues that need to be illustrated. I know the perfect person for that. Maybe there's portraiture. I know someone who's really good at realistic portraiture. But maybe we want something more abstract. Like, okay, I know a person for that. So it's
How
like
interesting.
it's very interesting. It's like very collaborative. And what else is really interesting is that these people are all strangers. My coworkers are just, it's someone on the other side of a computer telling me, there's a little bit of trust where I'm like, they're like, oh, can you do this job for X amount of money, X amount of time? And then we have this sort of blind trust to one another where it's like, okay, this person will deliver what they say they will. So it's kind of, it's like this interesting exchange of goods. It's not like I have a salary, and it's just like, it's very I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of not primitive, but it just seems simple.
Yeah. So AJ, can I ask you, you were describing that certain artists are maybe good for certain types of things that they're working with
Yes.
At a publication. Do you have like a specialty like that?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of stuff for the New Yorker, and they always ask me for portraits. So I love drawing faces, people. Just portraiture has always been something that I really enjoyed doing. So I got one job, then other publications, other websites, magazines, they'll be like, oh, wow, AJ did that thing. Everything has the illustrator's name attached to it.
Sure,
So
yeah.
then they look me up, and they're like, okay. So then that's how it sort of like snowballs. Like
I
you
see.
start to build a repertoire of work based on what you did, which can be a blessing and a curse, because sometimes people make something that maybe their heart wasn't in it, but then people keep asking them for that same thing. So like, you're not going to turn down the opportunity, and it's money, but at the same time, there's also this level of artistic fulfillment that maybe an illustrator artist might want for themselves. So sometimes you'll see artists just like completely change their style up because they're so sick of drawing like clip art type art. There's just so many there's so many phases artists go through. Sometimes people can just draw the same thing in the same style over and over and over again, and they have a great career. Other times people are really searching to do something original and different and keep it fun for themselves.
Right, yeah.
So I forgot your question was, but I hope we touched on.
My question was, do you have a specification for what it is
right.
that you do? Yeah.
So there's portraiture. I guess I'm sort of versatile. I can do you'll get more conceptual stuff from like a New York Times article, or there are certain stories that will be given to you where there's like more imagination, versus like, oh, we need a portrait of J.K. Rowling or whoever. So, I can do both, but typically it's like portraiture they come to me for. During the quarantine, I got a lot of images of kids through Zoom and like business people on Zoom and Zoom fatigue. Like it's funny because you start to see trending topics. So you'll see all these people drawing Trump. You'll see all these people drawing whatever is in the news. Like that's what needs to be drawn, yeah. So I guess maybe portraiture and comics. So yeah, sometimes your strengths sort of, or maybe even your weaknesses define what you do, because like I don't think I'm very good at doing like landscapes or typography. So like I'll do a lot of people. Like I love drawing people and different sort of actions that they could be in or settings or whatever. So all that to say, I like drawing faces. I guess faces.
So okay, like in my head, right? Like you use J.K. Rowling for an example.
Sure. Controversial.
Like do you
I don't know why she came into my mind.
It's okay. It's okay. I love her. So like you draw by hand first, like you have to educate me because
Sure.
Like do you like do it digitally? I don't understand.
So the interesting thing is like to go back even further from just the job. When you're say you're interested in art and then you go to art school, the whole time what they're drilling into you, especially for an illustration degree, which is what I got, is finding your voice, finding your style, which is like the most daunting thing ever for a young artist. Yeah. It's like, I don't know myself. I just graduated from high school. Like, what am I supposed to do? But so then you follow your interests and you follow the artists that you look up to. And then you sort of become like an amalgamation of all your influences, film, photography, painting, music, like all these things start to inform your visual style, whether that's painting, watercolor, printmaking, digital work. Like everyone has a different application for this voice. So to fast forward to a job, for me personally, since I've graduated from school, I've sort of locked down a formula for me to make images quick and in an interesting way that still is fun for me and is reflective of my personal voice. And all that comes with experience. Like the more you do it, the more you realize like how much time, length of time kind of determines a lot of what you can do, So say for your example, we're illustrating J.K. Rowling, I would collect unless they have a specific pose for me, I would collect a bunch of reference photos, and then you sort of composite all these things. Maybe you do some sketches, whether that's on paper or digitally. You can do the sketches however. But for me personally, I usually go to my sketchbook, do these little thumbnails, and then those thumbnails become bigger thumbnails, and then I'll transport that little thumbnail that I got. Maybe I like the way that her face looks like at a quarter angle, and I'm thinking about what could be in the background, maybe dragons and Voldemort or something. And then I put that all in the little sketch, then I blow it up, put it take a photo or scan it, put it into my computer, and then I put it to my iPad where I have Procreate. It's a program that a lot of artists are using these days, which replicates real pencils and paints really well.
Okay.
Or an artist will use Photoshop, which is like a lot of people use Photoshop to draw, or Illustrator. There's just so many ways, but I would take it into Procreate, and then I'm basically layering. I'm like refining the lines as I draw over each iteration of what I did, and then but before I go towards the finish, I have to have a conversation with my art director. I send them typically three examples of different takes on the prompt, and then they come back and it's a conversation where they're like, oh, we don't like this one, but we like that one. Maybe you can add parts of this one into that one. So then I do a revision, and then once I finally get their approval, then I go to town on it and I make it look really pretty and make it look like a finished piece, but those things are different for everyone, because there are some illustrators that work completely analog, like they're using oil paint or yeah. So like imagine the time crunch. Like the art director has to know what they can ask for in what amount of time and what's realistic for the assignment. So like, so an art director isn't going to ask someone who oil paints to do an op-ed illustration, which typically, you have to finish that by like 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Like you get the assignment at 9 a.m. has to be done in the afternoon. So they'd probably ask someone like me, who does everything really quick on a computer. So yeah, it's a very interesting process. Sometimes very, very stressful. It's exciting. It just depends.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I'm like so amazed right now. So, I mean, so sometimes your timelines can be just a day.
Yeah. Sometimes it could be, half a day. Other times it could be up to, depending on what it is, like a month, 6 months. Like, for instance, I'm working on a comic with the New York Times for mental health awareness, and I've been working with them on it since July. So it's just been back and forth.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then I'm about to start a new big book project, and like the expectation for me to finish is like June 2022. So there's a lot of discrepancy depending on what kind of job is being asked. Sometimes like the day turnaround things I'm talking about are usually like the New York Times, because they have a ton of content, as you can imagine, in a big newspaper like that. That like they need a ton of images fast. So
that's crazy.
Super crazy.
It's
super wild.
Stressful. I'm so stressed even thinking about it.
I know. It's fun. It's a sort of a young person's game, because like you can stay up and I mean, anyone can do it, but it's like you have the energy when you're younger, because maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I was working at full time as a footwear design colorist.
Okay.
When I first got out of school, and then I was also freelancing. So like I would get these half-day turnaround projects while I'm at work, and I would still accept the job just because like that's what was interesting to me. Like I didn't really care too much about the footwear job, but I was really interested in getting a illustration career started. So
wow,
I was juggling a lot,
That's crazy.
And typically illustrators, it's not a shameful thing to have a regular 9 to 5 or a part-time job, because until you really take off or have like a broad swath of clients, you're going to need to make money somehow. So there's plenty of illustrators that are, baristas or they're working like in animation, or there's just so many different combinations. There's not one way to do this profession. Like a lot, you don't even have to go to school, really.
Sorry, so an animator would be different than an illustrator.
It would be, but sometimes they also do. There's, like most of the people that work at, like, for instance, I have a lot of friends that work at Netflix Animation or Cartoon Network or something. All those people, not all of them, but a ton of them do freelance work on the side, like whether it's for publications or they make comics or they make graphic novels or they work on music videos. Like if you talk to an illustrator, they're typically very interesting people. Like they just have, they're very kind and very interesting, like, because you have to be easy to work with,
Ah, I
like with an
see.
art director. So
I
like typically
see.
everyone's really not like phony nice, but they're genuinely nice people. But
No, I mean, obviously, you're great. Like,
ah, thanks, Blair. I'm not tooting my own horn here. I'm talking
no,
about
no, not at all. I mean, not at all. Well, AJ, talking about, your past as a footwear design
uh-huh.
colorist and things like that, I'd love to hear more about, where it all started.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, like, I mean, you kind of mentioned some things here and there, but so when you graduated high school, you were
Hmm.
in Long Beach, right?
So I was born in Florida,
Okay.
and then I moved to California when I was like in middle school.
Okay. And then were you like in Southern California, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I was in Southern California, Norwalk,
Okay.
California, which is
So I don't know if Monique told you, I went to UC Irvine for a couple
oh
years,
yeah,
and
sick.
then
Go Anteaters.
yeah, Gazat.
Yeah, there you go. Well, what a weird. I didn't know they make that noise.
So weird. But I take pride in it. But
Yeah.
anyways, and then my parents they grew up in Huntington Beach, and then
Okay.
my parents currently live in Costa Mesa now.
Nice.
So I know Norwalk, but
Yeah.
so you grew up there after moving there in middle school, you said.
Yes. And then I went to high school in Bellflower, and I even when I was really young, I had a fascination with art, and a lot of people surrounding me were very creative. My
Mm.
grandmother was a school teacher, and she was always making crafts and making us draw stuff. And my older brother was a super big nerd, like a Trekkie, and collected comics. And he would always have me and my middle brother, drawing, and he would teach us like, this is how you ink a comic. And it was really cool. And it sort of, I got the bug at a young age. But then in high school, I was drawing a lot in class, and I may have gotten in trouble a few times, but it was enough to be like, I need to stop drawing completely so that I can focus on academics,
Oh
because
wow.
I think I just like, I saw it as a distraction. No, it wasn't like, I didn't have any parents chirping at me, or my own, no one was telling me not to do this. I just like, I saw the people around me that were really taking school seriously, and I thought that I had to do the same. So I didn't discover my passion for art again until community college, because yeah, it was interesting. I went through high school. Um, I was playing a lot of music. I sort of was in bands, and I was in the school band, and I thought maybe that might be something in my future. I thought maybe I could be a musical engineer, or like a recording engineer, or and then I just like, when you graduate high school and everyone's like, they all have their plan, they know what
Yeah.
they want to do,
Yeah.
so it's hard for someone that doesn't.
Mm.
And for me, I didn't like, I think I told my parents like, oh, I'll be a nurse like you guys, and that made them really happy, because they, being Filipino, being a nurse, it's a high honor for them if I followed their footsteps. But then, I was just saying stuff. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, everyone was applying to schools and getting into like UCI, UCLA, and
Yeah.
I just I sort of half-heartedly. It wasn't like I was a bad student, but I just didn't. I don't know. I didn't pursue it as hard as my friends did that were like super AP students, and I ended up going to community college. And community college is completely underrated. Like, if you need time to figure stuff out, that's like the perfect incubation
Yeah,
place
man.
to do it. You're not spending much money. There's plenty of time and space for you to develop as a human being, because
Mm.
education is expensive. So you want to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, and doing what you want to do. So it was there that I took a bunch of humanities courses, and the only class that I didn't hate was a printmaking class, and I
Mhm.
just took that on a whim because I needed like an elective credit.
What is
And
printmaking?
printmaking is like silk screen,
Okay, okay.
uh, lithography, wood cuts, like anything that requires a substrate to
Uh-huh,
print
uh-huh.
an image on something else. So
Okay,
like,
gotcha.
glorified stamps. Like just think
Right,
of
right.
a rubber stamp. You know what I mean? Some
I guess, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Some, it's like, it's kind of funny. It's like this, when Germans invented the printing press, like there's certain sect of artists like kept doing this like super ancient technology. Like it's just funny that it's awesome. I love printmaking. It's sort of, but it's just funny that the super super old thing is still in vogue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
I didn't even
so
know like they had classes on. I mean, it sounds super interesting.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah. I mean, maybe I'm dating myself, but when I was in community college, I was taking like analog photography classes where you would like develop film and
So
stuff.
fun.
Yeah, I think my college was the only one in the area that had like a dark room. Like everyone, it's sort
Wow.
of this old fashioned thing. But so this printmaking class was super inspiring, and the teacher was so great. And he's someone that is the reason that I went to the school that I did after community college. He was just in my ear, like telling me like a lot of the teachers there. So I went to Cypress Community College, and they were all such great mentors. Like they
Mm.
all were guiding all the students. They were very invested in their students. They wanted the best for them. They were telling us about grants we can apply for and different schools and different scholarships, and that's sort of where I was told about Art Center. People describe it as like the Harvard of art schools or whatever.
Yeah. I know Art
Um,
Center.
yeah, it's a great school. And I ended up, there was sort of this impasse
Mm.
where I was finishing school at community college. I got into, I think, I was able to transfer to Cal State Long Beach or Otis or Art Center. And like, I had a conversation with my dad, and I was really discouraged because I saw how expensive like art school
Yeah.
was. And I
Yeah.
just didn't think my family could afford it.
Mm.
I thought the wiser decision was to go to like um, a Cal State, where I would be able to afford whatever loans that I had to take out for those schools. My dad was just like, the person you think would be the guardrail to hard decisions like that. He was just like, you should do what you want to do. Like you should, you only get, I mean, people get many chances to go to for like a higher education, but for me at that moment, he was like, he believed in me enough to go and pursue my dreams, and he was
Mm.
like, you should go to Art Center. I think you'll do well, and it's, you'll just you'll be able to pay it off. Like it's just a
Ah.
payment. So it was awesome.
Yes, I
Yeah,
love it. I just love it.
yeah, it's
I
so
mean, as a
great.
parent, a new parent myself, I'm like, yeah, like that's what you want to say to your kid, and to
Totally.
be able to say that. And I'm sure, there's a reason you thought what you thought during that time about what
Mm,
maybe your dad would say. But for
right.
him to say something that I'm sure for you in that moment, I mean, I would imagine was just like the green light to just let's do
Yeah,
it, right?
exactly. It was he gave me the keys to the castle. It was a very,
Yeah.
very pivotal moment for me, and very thankful for him for,
Yeah.
giving me his vote of confidence. So,
AJ, before you continue your story, I just wanted to mention, like, I really appreciate what you said about community college and about
yeah,
it just being an incubator for kind of figuring things out and not to be, I mean, let's be real here. Like, I do a podcast for Asian Americans and
right, 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 right.
and like for
Yes.
whatever reason, no, I know exactly the reason.
Yeah, it's a prestige thing,
Yeah.
but I do appreciate that you appreciate that, because like I'm sure every guest you've had on here, there's no right way to do life, like,
Exactly.
and if you're gonna let what someone thinks of you discourage you from doing things in a way that you can afford it,
Mm.
it's what's more important is you following your path and your passion rather than listening to people that may not have your best interest at heart.
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
but I understand the hesitancy. Like there's a lot of pressure to get into a good school, and like even more so like for your children too, where it's getting more and more competitive,
Yeah.
just to survive and live and afford a life. So I can understand, it's not coming from a bad place where when people are sometimes um, discouraging for taking an alternate route. But
Yeah.
whatever works, you know, however people can make it. I say just go for it. If you can't afford a different way, then you find a way to make it work.
No, absolutely. And I think, what you make of it matters too, right? Like
Sure.
if you're going to make that decision, like it sounds like you really made the most of it. And it's part of the reason, you've gotten where you are today too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that a little bit. But, so
Thanks,
you get
bud.
into art center, which by the
Yeah.
way, is there, so that process to get into art school, is it like a difficult one? Do you
Oh
need
my
to like
God.
submit
Okay. So like
things?
there's you know, like an Ivy League school or any prestigious school, like there's a mythology and a folklore. Like there were people, it was almost like I was around in battle, like veterans like that were at community college that had tried to get into certain schools, and they're just like, oh man, I applied to art center like 3 times and I didn't get in. And it's scary. Like
Mm,
I sort of applied knowing that I wouldn't get in, and I ended up getting in like first try. But I don't think that speaks to my skill at the time. I think maybe the school was going in a direction where they're letting in a lot of people, like especially illustration, where um they were it was like my class was the biggest class that they had ever admitted, because art center is typically, you know, someone's second degree, typically in their mid to late 20s,
I
early
see.
30s.
Okay.
But that trend of people going to this specialized trade school, let's call it, was sort of in decline.
Mm,
And a pipeline of high school students directly to this prestigious art school was sort of opening up. So
I see.
that was sort of the time that I arrived. And I was considered an older person. I was like 20, 22, 21.
So old, so
Yeah,
old. My
I was
goodness.
ancient because because people were coming out from high school like, you know, super young, 16,
Like
17, 8.
grandpa here.
Yeah, yeah. So it's also interesting because like you can sort of spot out the when you're in a classroom like that, and they're typically smaller sizes. You look around and you know, you just know who's been around the block a few
Right,
times.
right, right.
It's fascinating. It's like such a fascinating ecosystem of like young and middle aged to, you know, I had some like 40, maybe some middle almost 50 year olds in my classes. It was
Mhm, mhm.
fascinating. Just like all types of people.
Wow, wow. So you get into art school and art
Hmm.
center. And so how was school itself challenging for you?
Yes. I mean,
Mm,
if you talk to any art center student, the thing, there's a few topics that sort of will be in rotation, but it's also like this it doesn't matter when you graduated, everyone went through that gauntlet, you know. I feel like a lot of schools are like that regardless if it's
yeah.
an art school or not. So you know, they talk about all-nighters, and they talk about certain teachers that have this built up mythology of being terrifying and hard, and they'll rip your work off the wall. There I had a teacher who would bring a trash can, and he would just walk around the class and rip the pieces off the wall and just throw them in the garbage, you know, like that kind of
Like,
like intensity.
but like, why? Like,
I don't know. I don't know if like it seemed unnecessary to me. I don't know, but maybe it was mostly showmanship. But there was I there are some teachers that had been let go for going too far. Like
sure,
some,
sure.
yeah, but
Artists, what are you gonna do?
yeah, I know it's just they're getting too wild over there at their art school. But
Um,
my experience was fantastic. Like I had there's an alumni there that describes art center as like Hogwarts, and it's totally a great description because everyone there is so talented. It feels
mm,
magical. Like even the campus is like in the mountains, and there's like elk and deer running around, and
really? I did not
yeah,
know
it's
that.
crazy. It's like they're always warning us of rattlesnakes and stuff
Oh,
and
wow.
coyotes. But you know, the teachers I had were amazing. Really, really, you know, just like my community college teachers, they just care so much about your, not beyond art making, like they care about you as a person. At least that was my experience. But it was challenging. I mean, I was terrified going into that school because I was by no means good when I went in. Like, I don't think I was better than anyone else. And even in community college, I felt like I was surrounded by so much talent. And the thing about being surrounded by talent, in any profession, is that it pushes you to get better or like improve your game. It really motivates you. So I think the community that I fostered at Art Center was one of my biggest takeaways, because the people you're rubbing shoulders with, your friends, the people you eat in the cafeteria or whatever, they're future art directors. They're like people that work for huge companies after you graduate, and they're going to be hiring you. Like, there's just a lot of healthy competition, I'd call it, but it was a lot of growing up too. I spent a lot of time really trying to absorb as much as I could when I was at school.
Yeah. So, as an illustrator major, is that what you call it?
Yeah. So
what are you like learning in these classes? Like,
Mhm.
you already know how to draw. So like, are you learning like technique or how to tell
Some
a
people don't know
story?
how to draw. I mean, like there's levels. I mean,
Some people don't know how to draw.
Quick story. I was TAing for a class once, and this girl was just terrified, and there's a live model, and everyone else was drawing like furiously, pencils moving, and this girl just like almost in tears calls me over as the teacher's assistant. Is like, and she whispers to me, "Can you teach me how to draw?" And I'm like, "How did you get into this school?"
Yeah, how does that even happen?
I don't know. It was wild, but
Must have been the year they're just letting people
yeah,
in.
probably.
That's crazy. Okay.
So when you go there, illustration is so broad. Like we were talking about in the beginning of our talk, it can, be categorized for motion. It could be categorized for editorial, which is like printed matter, paper, newspaper, website, or even websites. And then there's storyboarding and sort of images for feature films, animation. And then there's surface design. There's like people making textiles and patterns for clothing or shoes.
Oh, wow.
So it's like you can designate what your path is. A lot of the most successful people in the programs at Art Center were ones that people who had an idea of where they wanted to be. People, they sort of tailored the curriculum to fit where they would go professionally after school, but not everyone had it figured out like that. So they have specific tracks. So like illustration, there's 4 tracks. It was illustration design, which covers like editorial and books and like making images for websites, stuff like that. Then there's illustration entertainment, which is for people that want to work at Pixar and Disney, and they want to paint the backgrounds. They want to do the storyboards for the next Mulan, and there's surface design, which is, like I said, objects that need images on them. And then there was something else. I'm forgetting,
okay.
but the track that I picked was illustration design, and a lot of people went to that one specifically because it was broad in its you can pick your classes more freely. Other ones had a very strict track that you had to stick to. So with illustration design, it was like blue skies. Like you can kind of make what you want. But so that was my designation. I also took a lot of graphic design classes because I had envisioned myself to be working primarily in editorial.
I see.
Which is interesting because at the time, print is dying,
print is dying.
And everything is, so there's always this constant argument where it's like, are we still going to need illustrators one day? Are we going to need, when clip art came in, they're like, oh, we're not going to need illustrators anymore. We can just use clip art or whatever. But, I think what stood the test of time is creative people adapting and like people still need images online.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the trajectory I was headed in when I took those classes. And it starts off very, very basic. So you have your design classes, you have, you're learning about shapes and shadow and lighting, and perspective. So a lot of basic fundamental art type stuff that you probably learned in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
You're refining those kinds of things like color theory. And then as you progress, it becomes less about the form and learning about how to make an image and compose things. And it sort of turns it on its head. Like after, like halfway through the program, they're like, okay, now take what you've learned and distort it through your lens. And like, then it becomes about how do you interpret like an article, or what is your life experience? Like, how can you take those things and create a unique image? Like, how do you take experiences that you have and find your voice? Like, did you grow up did you grow up in like riding motorcycles? Like, can you incorporate like the lifestyle that you had into how you want to express yourself? Because
I'm so stressed listening to you
it's
right
very
now.
stressful. It's very stressful because it's so ethereal. It's so like,
yeah, like does that come naturally for you, or is that a muscle you had to exercise over time?
I think for me, I think it was a muscle. But you start to, the more you explore yourself, the more you learn what you like and what you don't like.
Okay. But I guess that's what school is for, like to teach you how to do
time. It's your time to learn that kind of stuff and sort of trial and error when you're in school.
No,
so
seriously, AJ, my hands are sweating.
I know, I'm getting sweaty reliving this.
Because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't do that. Like I'm not. Do you know what your MBTI is by any chance? Like your personality?
I know my Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, that's what it is. Myers-Briggs. Do you know that?
I'm INFP.
INFP. Sounds right.
That's what Mo said when she met me. She's like, "You're an INFP."
No, because like just that out of the box thinking and stuff. Like I'm like, oh no, thank you.
Yeah. It's a difficult thing to wrap your head around, especially at a young age. But
that's amazing. Like
it's fun.
Sense. Yeah,
it's really fun. I mean, depending on, so the classes later in school were like illustration for journalism or op-ed illustration, where it was actually you take a dry run at doing what you would do in the real world. So like for that class, we had a former art director at the New York Times that would, every week everyone would get the same article, and then the next week everyone would critique each other on how they interpreted that article, like which ones were the most successful. So there's it's not so fine arty where you can do anything and everything. In illustration, there's sort of constraints where you can be creative. So you use, for instance, the article. You would search the article for cues on what you can draw, or what's the tone, what's the mood, what are the themes you want to, what are the things that you want to communicate to the reader that you can summarize the article or just give a taste of in a fun, creative way, or you're trying to express something that maybe works in tandem with the writing,
Okay.
So that's what we were doing in the later class.
Right. Oh man.
Yeah, it's
so cool.
That's a skill that's hard.
I can't handle it.
If you took the class, that you would be able to. And
it sounds like I want to throw up in that class. but that's really cool. It's cool to know. There's probably no right answer for this question, AJ. Yeah. But I'm curious, like, in your life in particular, it sounds like, going to community college first and then going to art center was beneficial for you. But would you have done things differently if you had known beforehand? Like, would you have gone straight out of high school if you could have, or?
No, I wouldn't have, because people that came out of high school, they would tell me that me and my friends that were older smarter and more lucky, and there's a certain amount of life experience, and you sort of know what you want to do when you're a little bit older. You have more of a grasp on, there's a little, it's not like you stop growing or you stop learning, but you have a more grounded view of the world. I'm speaking generally, but some people may be different, but I don't think I would do anything differently, because I think I've gone through life with very low expectations of what can be accomplished. So I'm constantly surprised by how life is going. I don't, any, it's good enough to be alive and breathing. So anything else is a bonus,
Yeah, for sure.
But I wouldn't do anything differently. I maybe I would just, I don't know. I think I would try and enjoy my youth a little more, and like stop worrying so much about the future, because those times are precious. The time, I'm sure you remember as yourself, like when you're young and you had endless time to do whatever you wanted, and now it's so different. Like you have a family, you have work, you have a podcast, so like you have responsibility. So I think the only thing I do differently is try and spend more time with the people I love, doing fun stuff.
Okay, so you graduate from art center, and then if it were a typical Asian household, parents might be like, so you're an artist now.
Right.
How are you going to make money? That's
So,
what people listening maybe want to know.
Of course. And the interesting thing about Art Center is that it's commercially minded. It's not, there are a lot of art schools around the country that, they're not any worse or any better. They just have a different focus. Like maybe it's more about self-exploration. Maybe it's more about, I don't know. But like in Art Center, it was more about, how do I make money with what I'm doing?
Oh, wow.
They're very realistic and very grounded in how they would life after school, like how a student would navigate. It is amazing. It's very like I had a lot of my friends that went to school with me had transferred from other art schools because it was too blue skies. Like they just felt like they weren't learning any feasible skills for the real world, but when I graduated, even before I graduated, actually, I was getting paid doing freelance illustration work. Like I started getting jobs while I was still at school.
Wow.
And it was a little bit, it just felt good and it felt doable. Like, as soon as you rip the Band-Aid off and sort of get your foot in the door, you start to see that it's not this golden calf. Like it's attainable, like, so I had a good group of friends, and what you do is, typically if this was the 80s or the 70s, you would want to live in a place like New York, because that way you can take your portfolio, like a literal portfolio of your paintings and your drawings, and then you would go from different, like the New York Times, the Atlantic, whatever, Wall Street Journal. Like you would go up the elevator, and then you'd show them your work, and then maybe they'll call you. But it's cool that there's still a tradition of that amongst my friends, where we all took a trip to New York and we brought an iPad, or we brought our websites, or we brought like little things for them to remember us by, and we set up meetings with art directors.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty cool. It's like a way to get your foot in the door, because a lot of success in this industry is not about skill, and it's not about being the best. It's about being on somebody's radar, like they know that you exist, being kind and easy to work with, and they'll keep coming back to you. So I sort of did that before I graduated with my friends, and then I mean, there's a huge part of my story that we've sort of been omitting a little bit, and that's the entire time I was at school and pursuing these things. My girlfriend, she was like my high school sweetheart. We had been dating since sophomore year of high school. She was there rooting for me, and she was the one that encouraged me to follow all these dreams and stuff. And so when I graduated from school, she had passed away from cancer, which she had been battling since we got together. And so I didn't really have a plan for what I wanted to do after school. I didn't think that I even wanted to be living anymore. Like I had serious thoughts about
Mm.
non-existence and things like that. And eventually an opportunity came along. Like, I guess I sort of was still grieving, but then I snapped back to reality, and like that 6 month period of loan forgiveness was over. And I just, at that moment, I got a call from an acquaintance from Art Center, and he asked me if I wanted to work at Skechers with him. And I had zero experience. I didn't study any product design at school. I didn't know anything about footwear, but he believed in me, and he thought I was good enough with color and the basic design principles we learned at school to be worth taking a chance on to be a footwear colorist, which is what Monique does now.
Yeah.
At Roxy. And that's where I met Mo, was at Skechers. And
really?
yeah, so I got hired at Skechers, and she was a technician at this time.
That's right.
Yeah, and I was yeah, your listeners have to listen to these episodes together so they can, we're gonna have a trilogy. There'll be a third part probably. But
I'm always open.
I'm scheduling your speakers for you. But yeah, Mo and I met there, and she was, really instrumental in helping me through those times. And so like I told you, I was getting freelance jobs as I was graduating from school. I took this study abroad trip right before I graduated. I went to London, and I presented a body of work to a bunch of different people, like art directors, animation studios, ad agencies, publishing houses. And I got a book deal out of one of those meetings. So I had the book deal, and then I was working on freelance, and then I got the Skechers job. So I would be completely swamped at work, and Monique would always come and spend time with me after hours. Like she would just sit there and talk to me, and she'd always be interested in what I was working on.
Yeah.
And it came to the point where like I was so swamped that she took like a Google Doc and then like put how many pages I needed to get done each week. And like she was bringing me food, and like I was staying at the office like 24/7. I lived in my office because I used it as my studio to work on the book.
Goodness.
And to work on my illustration work, and then also just for work. So yeah, she was there every step of the way helping me out. And eventually I left my job at Skechers because I saw my friends around me, like they had taken the dive and pursued what they really wanted to do, which was, freelance or gallery work or animation. And I felt like I don't think there's anything wrong with doing things the way I did, but it wasn't my passion to be working in footwear. Like I wanted to give it a shot and see if I could be a freelance illustrator full time. So I quit my job with the intention of finishing my book, and then whatever happened with that would happen, and maybe I would just start to work full time, cold calling art directors and seeing if I can get some more work like that.
Yeah.
And the book came out, and all these opportunities that I get, it's really just, it's like serendipitous, because I quit Skechers, and then I had a friend that also went to Art Center that was like, I heard you don't have a job. Do you want to work part-time for like as a studio assistant? So there's a famous painter named James Jean, and he needed an art assistant. So I was doing that part-time, working on the book. And then all of a sudden the book starts to pick up steam. Like I start going on a book tour around the States, and I went to like Austin and Washington, D.C. and Toronto and all these different places. And the book gets translated into French and it just explodes in France. So then I go to France and I start touring around all over France, and all these amazing things happen, you know. And it's a beautiful thing because it's with my favorite publisher, and I wrote a book about my favorite, like one of my favorite people of all time, where it was her dream for me to to write a book and to pursue art, and I was doing it. You know, the tragic part about it is that she didn't get to see that.
Yeah.
But you know, it's an amazing thing. Just like you, like before we even started talking, you were telling me about how the book had affected you, and her story lives on through you now.
Yeah.
Like I think that's a fascinating side effect of this book coming out. And I'm sort of all over the place right now, but like,
No, you're good.
yeah, I think where I'm at now is exactly where she had predicted I'd be. You know, she knew that I would be here before I did.
I'm like,
I know, sorry.
no, it's okay. I just, you know, there's so many like emotional things like happening right now in my heart.
I know,
But
it's like a very, yeah, it feels like what's that Mandy Moore movie? Walk to Remember.
Walk to Remember. So you guys, okay, so this is a book. Hey Monique.
Yeah, Mo's over here in the corner.
Hey girl. So this is a book in waves. I purchased it. Guys, it's available anywhere you can buy books, okay? But so I will admit, I told AJ before kind of hopping on this chat with him, I didn't have too much time to read over it, but I had 30 minutes before we met, and it's a graphic novel. He not only is AJ an illustrator, he's an author, graphic novelist, and I thought the book was about surfing.
Yeah.
like I was fooled, and I think it may have been part of the reason, honestly, that I kind of put off like looking over it, because I'm like, oh, cool, like the artwork is amazing, like it's amazing, and I was like, man, I can't. This is so interesting, and then I start reading it today, and you guys, I like start crying, right? Like.
Sorry,
I'm like,
Blair.
Oh my god! Like this is not about surfing.
Right.
But I guess I again, I'm so sorry, AJ. I'm gonna take time. Please forgive me. But
no, go ahead.
I did kind of skip over the history. There is surfing in it. There is surfing in it. And it's like intermixed with the history of surfing and the story of Kristen. Her name is Kristen. And and you. And so I'm curious if I missed it, but like why is it intermixed like this?
Yes. You're not the first person to tell me that they completely skipped over the history to like
I just wanted to know what happened.
I know people are very invested in Kristen's story, which is awesome. Like that's such a gift. But so the impetus of this whole thing coming together was that project I told you about that I took to London. And I basically, the objective of that class was to take a portion of Los Angeles culture and introduce it to someone that's not from the area. Like, you know, take surfing and then tell someone in London about why it's culturally relevant. So what I did was I took with the advice of my teachers, they know the history, they're very super brilliant people, and they saw that I had a fascination with surfing, and they recommended that I look into a guy named Tom Blake, who's like the inventor of so many different things. He's like maybe like the father of modern surfing, basically. So
it seems that way in the book.
I did my whole project about that. So then when I showed the publisher that work, they were fascinated and they wanted me to make a book about historical figures throughout surfing's history.
Whoa.
But then, so like I did a rough draft and I sent some artwork over and some sample writings, and then all of a sudden they changed their mind and they're like, I don't we don't want to do that anymore. We want to do something with a personal narrative. And they're like, tell us why you got into surfing. Why is it important to you?
Mm.
So the person that got me into it was Kristen. Like, she loved it. She was super athletic, and she sort of ignited this passion within me to start surfing. I have been skating since I moved to California, but surfing was completely foreign to me. So then once I told them all of that stuff about Kristen's history with surfing and her recent death, they were like, you should write about that. And like, meanwhile, I'm in the throes of grief. Like, it's so soon. Like, she had just passed away maybe 3-4 months before this moment. And then they're like, write about this and combine it with the history of surfing. So condense the entire history of surfing into half of a book, and then condense the entire life of your partner into the other half.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, yeah, talk about sweating.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this is impossible. Like, I don't think I could do this. So the reason, like, maybe you reread the book and you'll see there's like threads connecting. There's a reason why the people and cast of characters that it chose to represent the historical side of surfing are in the book. Basically, they reflect my relationship with Kristen, where there's a man named Duke Kahanamoku, who's like, you know, the quintessential waterman. Like, he's a god to surfers, you know. So him and Tom have a very special relationship, one of reverence and respect and love. It's a different kind of love, but that sort of relationship was mirrored in what Kristen and I had. So I figured, after sifting through all this historical stuff, reading all these books, I'm like, I don't know how I can do this. I saw a thread there where it's like this simple relationship of mentorship and you know, adoration. I understand that. So I decided that's how I'd connect the two stories. And
I see.
Then I built around that. And then at the end of the book, you see how it's connected and why I made the choices I did. But it wasn't my idea to begin with, basically, is what I'm trying to say. It was the publisher's idea. They're like, find a way to combine this. So in typical form, like as the illustrator I am, I took the assignment and then I tried to make it work.
And you did.
Thanks, Blair.
Yeah.
It was,
I mean, I will read it again, but
yeah, please do.
But you definitely, I mean, listen, I'm not a graphic novel kind of person.
Yeah. That's many people have told me that too.
And my husband is, though. He enjoys them. And I was telling him, like, right before, because he was setting up the camera and stuff to, like, record and everything. He's like, you're reading that now? And I'm like, yes, I can't put it down.
Oh, awesome.
So you guys, I'm excited for you guys I might, like, if you, I would assume not a lot of people have heard of your book in my community, like where I'm from. But I'm excited to resource people and expose them to AJ Dungo.
Please do. I mean, I would be eternally grateful for that.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. So, logistically, I'm curious. So, how long from Genesis to like release did everything take?
So, April or June of 2016 was when I had the meeting, and then they called me, or they emailed me. We Skyped. July of 2016. Then I got the job at Skechers in September, and my entire time at Skechers, I was working on the book. So I worked at Skechers maybe 2.5 years, and then, you know, half of that time was dedicated to just writing research, rough drafts. So like, I'm sending all this stuff overseas and like big WeTransfer, like zip files, and they come back with notes, and it's just this back and forth conversation, like pen pals thing that we have going on. And then finally I get the green light after like 1.5 years, and they're like, okay, you have 1 year to draw everything, to draw, ink, color, do the type, do the cover, do the promotional material. Like, you have 1 year to do that, so get to work.
Oh my goodness.
So then that was crunch time. Like, I was taking time. I saved up so much PTO. I used that PTO to work on the book. Like, I took time off to work, and then we were doing, when you work at a company like that, you go to factory visits in China and stuff, and I would be working when we were in China. It was crazy. So then I quit the job. I was just like, I really want to focus and make this thing as good as it can be, because it felt like I was using a very, it was all my remainder time, all my leftover time outside of my 9 to 5. So like every weekend, every day I would stay after work, I would just be in the office. So yeah, all in all, like 2.5 years, I'd say. And then maybe another 6 months of doing promo stuff and like they, certain merchandising things that they wanted me to help with. So 2019 is when it was published. And then I did my tour that year. Librarian conferences. I went to a ton of librarian conferences. Like I didn't know that was a thing.
What is that?
So, yeah. So it's like a place, it's like a huge convention for librarians from all over the country. And they just go buck wild and they get drunk and they party.
What?
They're librarians, they're quiet all the time and they need everyone to be quiet, but like when they're together and they're surrounded by books, they just go quite crazy. Like, so
That's
but the
hilarious.
reason I know it's so funny, but the significance of them, which I had no idea, was they're the arbiters of books. Like they're the one, they're essentially drug dealers for children, where like every kid in the country is going to be reading the books that they sell, like they're the ones selling your book. They're the ones telling
Interesting.
They're the ones telling their libraries, their schools, like what kind of inventory and stock they need for the next year from all these.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Yeah.
Fascinating. So you want to impress these people. You want to wine and dine them. You want to get them cheese platters and throw your book on top of it. Like you want them to have a good opinion of your work, because it could determine a healthy, successful launch for your book. So
that's insane.
Fascinating. I had no idea.
So you had to do all that?
I went to one in Austin, Texas, and that, they went crazy. They had a marching band in there, and like people, all these like middle-aged women were like dancing and going wild.
Oh my gosh.
And apparently they filled the bars at night and they're having a good time. And then Washington, D.C. was like the countrywide conference. So it's like this huge event. And then the other events I did were like comic festivals and zine fests and things like that.
Wow, what an amazing experience. That's
really
awesome.
Cool. You're just surrounded by so much positive energy. Everyone's happy, a lot of talent, a lot of very knowledgeable people. It's a good time.
It's amazing. So AJ, like, I don't know if making a graphic novel was part of your plan or what something you desired. But now that you've done it, like, and you had mentioned a second book just now, right?
Yeah. I to answer your question, I think like, when you graduate, like there's a class called PDL at Art Center. It's the last class you take, and you sort of determine like, what do you do in a year from now, 5 years from now, like 10 years from now. And like, I think on mine, I put like work at like a design agency, write a book, do freelance.
Yeah.
And I did all those. So now I have nothing to do. Yeah. I have nothing to do anymore. But yeah, it was always a goal to do comics and make a graphic novel. I didn't know that it would happen so quickly. I thought it would be like a decade from when I graduated. But yeah, it happened. And I, like everything else in my life, I just fell into it. And I want to keep doing it. Like so I mentioned the second book. Another publisher reached out to me with a treatment, basically like a manuscript of a book, a young adult book. And it's a fascinating book about like a public school system in Chicago and censorship, and how these students like banded together to reclaim like, their freedom of speech and freedom to read what they want to read. So it's a really cool book, and it seems very prescient. And I was more than happy to lend my illustration services. So I'm not writing it, I'm just illustrating it this time.
Yeah, no big deal, just illustrating
it is a little bit easier. Like you have to wear two hats. It's a lot less work.
Sure.
Still a
No.
ton of work, but less.
I mean, even reading this in waves too, I'm like, because I'm interviewing you. So I'm like trying to think of things I would want to know. And
Yeah.
even like the writing, like, cause it's like it's very short,
Yes.
but like the emotion gets through.
That is due to like editing and re-editing and re-editing and re-editing. So like I would write and write. And I was very self-conscious about my writing because I don't consider myself a writer. I'm an illustrator, if anything. And um, I had written in school and I liked it, but I never thought I was like good at it, whatever.
Mhm.
So partially the reason like the words are so sparse is because I don't want to spoon feed the reader. Like I was really afraid of like being overbearing with
Okay.
what I was telling the reader. And it also comes down to like the imagery too is kind of sparse, and you just need you see what you only what you need. And um, but I also wanted to make it somewhat poetic and sort of impactful. Like I wanted to say more with less. I wanted the images to speak for some of the part. I wanted
Mm.
the text to explain what the images don't. So there's a lot of back and forth, and that was like a learning experience for me because writing a comic, I started with like a script, and then when I start drawing, I'm like, why am I the person reading it is like gonna have a stroke because they're reading what they see and they see what they read. Like it's like you're spoon feeding the reader and you're not letting them interact with the work. So I started to taper back on like the overwriting, and like when the image meets the text, there's a lot of revisions that you need to
Mm.
do to make it work in sync, because you can paint a picture and it'll work on its own. You can write a novel and it'll be good on its own, but when you put two together, there's like a marriage that happens that you need to be considerate of how a reader will digest the information. Like, will
Man.
it be seamless? Will it be smooth? Is it a good moment? Like when you turn the page, is there like an impactful moment? So all these things I'm learning and considering, and I did not know what I was doing. So I was reading a bunch of comics, a lot of graphic novels, a lot of
Yeah.
novels, and I was watching documentaries, like just a ton of stuff, trying to inform how to even write a narrative, because I never took a writing class. I don't know what I'm doing. So it was a lot of like monkey see, monkey do, a lot of standing on the shoulders of people who had been there before.
Yeah. Does an editor help you out in this process
Yes,
though? Okay.
absolutely. I mean, grammatically, they help. They're sort of a sounding board for me, because at a certain point I was writing so little that like the editor is like, this is your life and you understand it, so you don't need all the context, but us as a reader, you need to
Sure,
expand
yeah.
this universe more.
Yeah.
So that was healthy. Like it was an excellent conversation where you know they weren't telling me what to do per se, but they were sort of guiding me. They're the ones that help authors create books, so
Yeah.
they were extremely gracious and helpful.
Amazing. Well, I don't want to give too much of the book away and
Yeah,
too many spoilers, but I did have one more question about it.
please.
So there are some scenes where I felt like, okay, so the one where you're talking about chemo and like how the shattered pieces of her life. Oh God, I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna cry. And then you have to like she's like picking up the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just feel like you really had to go there. Like
Yeah.
in order for us as a reader to know where she had been and where you had been even during that time. Like what was that like for you to like relive
Mhm.
everything?
It was challenging. I think like a lot of times I would just spiral. Like I would be
Mm.
because like she had just passed away, and I'm writing about all these things and I'm reliving all these memories and traumatic events in her life. But at the same time, I was spending so much time reliving those happy memories or sad memories. And
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was just it was both like detrimental but also joyous. Like at
Mm,
the same time, it's a back and forth, sort of like an emotional roller coaster. But um, you know that I always say this, but the book is incomplete. Like you're just getting my side of the story. I interviewed her family as well because I wanted to have them be a part of the story and, you know, share the person that they love from their viewpoint. But it's always going to be incomplete because she's not there to tell her side of the story. And I think that's a tragic part of this, where um it would be so much richer, it would be so much better if her voice was in it,
mm,
um, so it's like my faulty memory trying to do all the heavy lifting.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
And there's like this lyric in a song I always bring this up too, and it always gets me. Like this guy's singing about his partner who passed away from cancer, and then he says, like, he's singing about foxgloves. He's like, what about foxgloves? Um, did you like those flowers? Like, I can't remember, you did all my remembering for me. And like, I'm sure, like, with your husband,
Mm,
you guys are two parts of a puzzle.
yeah.
Like half of your life is belongs with him, so it's it's hard to stomach, like, God forbid the day that one of you is without the other, like, you
Right.
accessing those memories, accessing all that knowledge is gone,
Mm,
like, that's that's the challenging part, I think, of
mm,
writing a book like this,
yeah.
or one of the challenging parts.
Yeah. Well, thank you for answering that so transparently, AJ. I know
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I wrote a book on it. I gotta
Yeah.
I gotta
No.
answer the question.
No, but yeah, I mean, for me, you guys can just purchase a book and see for yourself. But that one picture, I could not stop staring at it. Like
Yeah,
the three graphics of
yeah.
her, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like I don't know I don't know why. I
Mm.
don't know if I'm." And then I thought, "Do I feel like this right now?"
Mm,
Like,
mhm, mhm.
like I'm like, what is this feeling that I'm having?" And anyways, all that to say, it was just so beautifully done. And for
Well,
me, I
yeah.
just wanted to share, like, man, illustration in talking to you, right? Like, what you said so beautifully, like, it's a voice, like, it's giving a voice, and I'm like, I never thought of it like that.
Yeah,
So
I mean, that's the power of illustration or writing or any sort of art form, is like, you as a participant, it can evoke things that I didn't intend for you to, like, an artist can control how someone experiences something to a certain limit, but the beauty of it is that you're participating as well. And um, yeah, it's like, it speaks to the power of imagery. Like,
yeah,
we can just look at a picture and it might be meaningless to someone else, but like, it can really move you. So
absolutely.
um, yeah, I'm really touched that you uh, that moment resonated with you, because I needed to find a way to illustrate Kristen's resilience. And
Yes, yes, that's what it is. And I just love it. Like, I'm like, that's what life is. Like,
yeah, for sure,
like, that's what
for
life
sure.
is. You just pick up the pieces and do what you got to do for the people you love, And okay, anyways, I could go on and on. But AJ, I really appreciate you. I try to keep things to an hour, and I talked like forever. So I
No,
don't want to
no, this
keep it
was
too
great.
long.
No, no,
Um
this is fantastic, and I just want to thank you for taking the time and being so generous and gracious.
oh no, absolutely. I feel so, like, so much more informed about what it is that you do, and I'm curious. I usually ask my guests if you have any advice for anybody that's listening, that's like, oh, wow, like, maybe this is something I want to do, or just any life advice at all.
Oof, that's a tough one. Um, hmm. I mean, if my career in life can be somewhat of a cautionary tale or some sort of helpful advice column for someone, it's like the lesson is just, you never know what can happen when you take on a job, or if you say yes to something, or if there's an opportunity presented to you. Like, obviously everyone has their limitations and they can't do everything, but if you see an opportunity come, it's worthwhile to explore it. And a lot of stuff has sort of come my way just from me saying yes to things and being open to people, and being a compassionate person. And you doing this podcast and interviewing people just on a whim, like maybe they'll say yes, maybe they'll say no, and then you end up with a relationship, and you have a conversation, and wisdom's imparted. And I love that. Like, I think you should be telling people some advice right now, because I think with what you're doing here, it's very it's like an exploration and curiosity, and I think that's very valuable. So yeah, just take chances, do what you want to do, and enjoy life, because life isn't all work. I think a lot of people forget that, at the end of people's lives, they're not thinking about like the spreadsheets that they had to work on or the illustrations they did. They're thinking about their loved ones and how much they wish they had more time with them. So I'd say enjoy your time on this planet and be grateful for what you do have, because someone might not have the same.
I could not have said that better myself. Thank you, AJ, for your advice, for today, for that reminder, even for my own life. I think sometimes I get so caught up in the everyday that I just need to be grateful. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks. That's Kristen for you. She's the one that, seeing someone go through what she did and still have a smile on her face and be concerned about other people.
Yeah.
You learn to value your breath and your lungs and being able to walk. And anyway.
Oh, yes. AJ, I was wondering if there's anybody that maybe had any questions about being an illustrator, or maybe like, they want to make a graphic novel one day. Would you be okay with me connecting you with them?
Please do. Absolutely. Because that's how I got started. Like, very generous people that didn't have to take the time did that.
Awesome.
Exactly. So please do reach out to me, like DM me, email me. Like, I'll try my best to get to you, but anything I can do to help. Thanks,
AJ. You guys, I'm serious. I'm not just promoting it because he's here on my podcast. Like, I know it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I really was like just enthralled like for 30 minutes in this thing. And please, just it's like a love story, okay? Just get it. Yeah, for sure. But thank you, Blair. That's so sweet of you. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't want to just say things to say it, because I truly do mean it. You guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, or if you had questions for AJ, you can DM me and I can connect you guys. Or if you have any questions at all, just feel free to email me at podcastwigu@gmail.com. All right, guys. Thanks so much, AJ, again for your time. Thank you. Until next time. Peace.